Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Once again, welcome to Happy Hours of Coaching Session, Friday evening, 8 o'clock, same place, same time. And today I have a very distinguished speaker, Arijit, someone with whom I worked in one of my earlier organization. Arijit comes with a rich experience of 24 plus years in digital transformation, agile transformation, has been also himself been a trainer, consultant, and a coach. And he's come out with a very interesting topic on war of frameworks. And I'm sure all of us are curious enough to know more about this topic as we go along. So without any further delay, let me hand over the baton to Arijit. And Arijit, the stage is all yours. All of us are excited to hear what exactly are you going to cover and talk around in this topic. So over to you, Arijit.
Okay. So thank you so much, Ashutosh. Yes, as Ashutosh mentioned, I mean, we go a long way, and it's very interesting history that we have. And firstly, I should congratulate Ashutosh on doing what he is doing today. You know, it's very difficult to find someone who really understands the topic and is putting in so much of effort towards ensuring that the clarity of the topic prevails. And all the videos that Ashutosh has published, you know, whenever I get time, I do run through those, and I will encourage all to run through that and subscribe to his channel. So I will try and share. I mean, so I think probably I would need that, permission to share the screen. So today the
Yeah.
topic that we have set for ourselves is, let me first share my screen and then I will take it forward. So I hope my screen is visible now.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay. So today's topic is War of Framework, and I have called it WAF. More about it we will hear later on, but for the time being, let us stick to this word WAF, and we will see how it goes. Now, a quick view on the agenda, and I do understand that, you know, we are towards the weekend, and I am kind of stopping you from venturing into the weekend fever. So I will try to keep it as short as possible so that you don't feel, you don't create any rage against me that blocking you. So a quick view on the agenda. We are first going to go through a disclaimer, a small introduction. We will try and understand what exactly we mean by frameworks, why we need frameworks, and we will try and touch upon that how we should ideally select a framework. So a disclaimer, this is just my personal views. Don't associate it with my organization, or be it present or past. It is my personal view only. There is no nexus between LST, Crystal, GSTM, FTD, AST, and DAD. And I hope you're all familiar with all these frameworks. We never claim that extreme programming is not safe. We never said that. If you're in rage, please call SOS. You know very well what is SOS. And just to be sure, neither any animal nor any trains were harmed in making this presentation. So saying that, we will try to first say a big thanks to all of you. It is so nice to meet all of you, albeit it's virtual, but it's really good. And I do see a lot of known faces. So it is so nice to, kind of be connected with you once again. Quick introduction about myself. Ashutosh already gave a pretty, elaborate explanation. I will just give you an introduction about me. This is my LinkedIn handle. If you want to connect, please feel free to do so. Now, my engagement with Agile or Scrum goes way back into the, chicken and pig story. Nowadays, we don't really hear much about this story. It has been kind of subsided. But my involvement started around 1990, 2000, when I was actually working on extreme programming, though we never really called it XP because we were not even familiar that something called extreme programming existed. Then gradually towards 2008 onwards, when I was formally introduced to the concept of Scrum, I started working with it. So I got my formal certification in 2008, and I got really committed to this. And then this certification journey continued. So 2013 was the early days of SAFE, and I was working with Cognizant, and we were introduced to this framework, and we got certified. And it's a long journey since then. So we'll get to hear more about it as we progress. So I have an interest about all the different frameworks. So whenever I get an opportunity, I try to dig deep into it. And in between some of the other associated, whatever knowledge, information comes my way, I try to, get a hold of it. And I also ventured into Scrum at Scale. I also became a Scrum at Scale trainer. And incidentally, very thankful to Scrum at Scale and Dr. Jeff Sutherland, who actually, I had so many things to learn from him. A quick view of the different organization and engagements that I worked with. But again, I'm not trying to bore you with all my personal stories. Today, we are going to be learning about the war of frameworks. So let us first understand what is a framework. Now, I will try to make it interactive. So uh, why don't someone share what they feel or they think is a framework? When we use this word framework, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? And there is no right or wrong answer. So please feel free to share whatever comes your way. Let us try and make it as interactive as possible, because I don't want you bored with slides. And the more interactive we make it, the sooner we will be able to finish it. And you will get much more time back with yourself.
So participants, you can unmute yourself if you want to speak. I know I can see someone has written flexible and customizable.
I think it's more of a set of guidelines.
Yeah, Ashutosh,
right?
yeah, Ashutosh, this is me, Anand Atil. I have written that it is flexible and customizable.
I might be permitted to speak. Ashutosh.
Yes,
I think
Siddharth,
you
go
can
ahead. I can
unmute
hear you.
and
Yeah.
you can speak.
In my understanding, what I understand by a framework is that there is no set, there's no rule book as we used to have in the Princeton and waterfall days. So framework is a set of, let us say, philosophy or guidelines, and which you can adapt because it's a framework. It can be adapted to whatever your organization and whatever the culture of that organization is, and make it in a manner that is acceptable to all.
Sure.
Is my understanding.
Fair enough. I mean, so you used a very important word. You said a rule book, right? So there is a subtle difference between a rule book and a playbook. And this is more, we are coming from the context of the US football, where the games, the coaches, they always follow something called a rule book, which is a kind of definite set of rules which we have to abide by. But my playbook is my strategy, that I am going to abide by the rules for sure, but what my strategy is going to be, that is totally different and totally to me. So the rules are very bare minimum set of guidelines. So typically, what we get to see is when we talk about this, and if I go by the definition of it, so framework is essentially a supporting structure. It's a very loosely kind of guidelines, which does not necessarily define the entire picture per se, but it gives us a definite starting point. How we want to convert that starting point, it is up to us to decide. So for example, if we look into this structure, this is the typical, architecture or any development, construction, whatever is happening, you will see this kind of scaffolding all around the structure. So they have created a framework and they are trying to gradually scale it up as they progress. How they are going to structure it, it is based on their playbook. They are going to define whether it is going to be 8-story, 10-story, 12 stories, what kind of look and feel it is going to be. It is totally up to them. On the contrary, I mean, take the other part of it. So we were looking into a physical structure, whereas we can also see there are elements where there are certain guidelines which are coming. So these are not physical, but these are conceptuals. So by and large, what we are seeing is, and if we go by the definition, so it's a framework is either it's a real physical or a conceptual structure, which has a purpose. And the purpose is to support or guide building or development of something which is eventually going to deliver something useful. Okay, so far with me? Now I am going to move into something different. I'm going to talk about library. Now, you may be wondering that, we are talking about framework and all of a sudden library, from where exactly is library coming to this picture? Now here, we are taking a bit of, diversion. Let us think in terms of programming, development. In development world, whenever we are building any application, there are concepts of using a lot of framework, and there are also concepts of using a lot of libraries. So let us understand what are the libraries. Now, if you look into this picture, we can very well understand that library is basically a collection of a lot of resources, right? Here, the resources may be different formats of knowledge or information. It can be a paperback book. It could be some kind of a digital artifact, and it is there for us to use and learn and reuse. Now, there is a warning that in between, I would be diverting towards a bit of a technical discussion. But trust me, we would find a lot of similarity between the technology part of it, and on the other hand, the agile space. So taking the cue from the previous picture, library in the programming world, it's a collection of pre-existing, or we can say it is pre-written by someone, which we can reuse to optimize our work. So one simple example, so if we go into GitHub and if we search for this, you will find a library which allows us to do a validation on international phone numbers. See, why I should be using a library? Because if I use this library, I can simply reuse the existing code and I can do a validation in a span of time rather than waiting for a day to write a piece of code from scratch. And in today's world, libraries are all around us. And I have just taken a snapshot of some of the most popular JavaScript libraries. So if you see that, be it Angular, be it NPM, Node, or be it TypeScript, be it ECMAScript, or the traditional JavaScript, or whatever it may be, you see that there are so many varieties. Now, there is a relationship between framework and a library, and we would need to understand this. So it helps us to understand later on that how should we be selecting our frameworks and how should we be using the frameworks. So again, going a bit of technology space. So if we write a piece of code, and the previous example, writing a piece of code, it actually leverages some of the libraries. So yes, our code is going to call certain libraries. Fair enough. But if I'm using a framework, my framework would be comprising of multiple libraries, and my framework is going to call my code, whereas my code calls the library. So you see, there is a difference in library, the usage of library versus the framework. So bear with me, I'm going to try and make it a bit simpler to understand in the subsequent slides. So to summarize, when we use a library, we are in charge, we are the owner, we are the controller of the flow of the application. Based on my need, I am going to call the library. If I don't need it, I can just skip it. We choose when and where to call it. If I don't call it, I am not going to carry the library with me. Whereas if we are using a framework, the framework is going to act as the underlying platform. And if I'm sitting on the platform, then whatever the platform dictates, I have to follow that. Now let us move into the agile context. So if I take this example in an agile space, how should it look? So the same picture, our code is calling the library. There are frameworks which are calling our code, and the framework is comprising of many libraries. All good? So in agile context, we are changing our code with our approach. So let us assume that we are trying to run an agile transformation. So our approach is going to call libraries. So what are libraries? So these are typically all the best practices that we have learned, that we have gathered over the past several years in our working experience, or by hearing from someone, or by reading books, or by doing some training. So these are all our best practices. And the frameworks are the known ones, like, all the different possible frameworks. So be it Safe, be it Nexus, be it Less, be it DAD, or whatever it may be. Now, the problem is when we are using a framework, the framework is in charge of the flow. Now, why I say this word that the framework is in charge of the flow? Can someone or would someone be interested to share this view? And I may very well be wrong. So you can feel free to, say that, no, that statement is not exactly right. Even if we use framework,
Sorry, Arijit, I think you went on mute. Can you just unmute yourself?
okay, so my point was, so why do you think that, the framework is in charge of the flow? Do you think that framework is not exactly in charge, rather it is us who are in the charge? We are just leveraging the framework and that's it. I can stop using the framework at any given time and that should pretty much be fine. Or do you really think that, for example, if I'm using, say, SAFe, does it mean that I will have to follow certain approaches which are defined by SAFe? Otherwise, I will probably quote something what Ken Shaver is to say that, either you do Scrum or don't. There is nothing in between. So do you think that using a framework kind of enforces its boundaries on us? Or do you think that framework is still giving us a lot of flexibility and that should be okay?
Arijit, I think the framework is in charge of the flow if we stop thinking. But if
Very
we
well.
if we continue to think, then probably we are still in charge of the flow.
Very well said. I think
Yeah, I
this
have
word, yes, please go ahead.
in other way around, when we keep saying Scrum is defined for complex projects, in such case, the framework also acts as a lifesaver when it is a complex. We are releasing as MVPs. So it is either way around, right?
No,
I'm
no, no. We
unable
are
to
not
justify.
debating the fact that, it is a saver. Frameworks are definitely, they have their place, and that is why people use framework. But we are asking that if I use a framework, does it mean that it is kind of restricting my ways of working? Because I'm just giving a very simple
Agree.
example,
I
right?
agree
So,
with you.
yeah. So now let us see, and if we just move forward, because I promised that I will give you some time back. So let us first try and understand why at all we are using framework. And going by Simon Sinek, he says that start with the why. So we will start and ask ourselves, why do we need a framework? And this is where we will see that, of course, it gives us a common structure, right? So these are a set of best practices which are time and again proven. So we know that under this kind of circumstance, this kind of approach works. So it is all done and dusted for us. We just have to reuse. So you don't have to redo anything from scratch. Plenty of opportunity for us to reuse, and that is the experience or a lot of framework and artifacts which are already made available to us, which we can start using. So by and large, what it is saying is it actually cuts short our work. It saves us some time. And often we hear this word that, there is no need to reinvent the wheel, right? It's a time and again, it is a proven fact. But if it is so that don't reinvent the wheel, what does the picture denote? This picture, we are not reinventing the wheel, that's for sure. But you see, the wheel has gone through a lot of changes. It has improved over time. And if you really think about it, if you really ask that why and what is the so significant of it, one simple example is look into SAFe. SAFe, it has gone through a lot of change over time. When it was started by Dean Leffingwell in 2011, since then, it has been through so many changes and it has tried to adapt itself to a different format. And gradually today we are seeing another new version is coming its way. So you see, this word may not be the correct depiction that we are not reinventing the wheel. But what we are trying to say is we are trying to leverage an existing wheel and we are trying to make it even better for our given context. Now the question comes in. It is fact that we have to use library, we have to use frameworks, but the question remains: there are so many different frameworks. We are kind of puzzled at times, and probably most of the time we are when we are asked that how should we choose or how should we use the framework, we get confused because one part is first. Customer may ask us this question that should I be at all using any framework in the first place? Now, the answer to that is yes, of course, we need a framework, because if we don't use a framework, we have to do a lot of things, which would mean that reinvent the wheel, which we don't want to do. Now, the question is, fine, so we agree to this fact that we have to use a framework, but how and what is the best way of using the framework? And this answer was already given. I think someone shared that. And my apologies if I missed that name. That use framework, absolutely. Go ahead and use it, but use it with an open mind. Open mind, because we have to be ready to understand and not blindly follow the framework. And again, going a bit of, in technology space, that when we use a framework, we should inherit more. More we inherit, rather we should inherit less and we should implement more. More we inherit, the more baggage we carry. So in programming terms, if I am inheriting a base class, that would simply mean that I am going to carry all the baggage that comes along with my base class. And tomorrow, if that base class is being extended, my life is becoming even more complicated. And eventually it will be a very tightly coupled system and I won't be able to come out of it. Whereas if we implement some of the elements of the framework, then what would do is, first, we can get rid of the unnecessary baggage. Second, we can leverage what are the other possible best practices which comes our way. So inherit less. Leverage library. Why leverage libraries compared to using a framework as is because the moment we use a framework as is, we are kind of confining ourselves within a predefined boundary and we won't be able to step out of it. If we start using libraries, and remember, all the frameworks come with a lot of libraries. If we can isolate those libraries and can start using those libraries in combination, that means some of the good practices of framework A and some of the best practices of framework B, we may be able to do a better solution. Because you are always free to choose libraries across all the different frameworks. Now, it sounds quite easy, isn't it? We are just saying that, what's the big deal? There are so many different libraries, there are so many different frameworks. And if you're at X number of frameworks, there are at least 3X or 10X number of libraries. So go ahead and pick and choose and you are done. But unfortunately, it is not as easy as it appears. So it is, of course, a lot of hard work. And as we grow our experience, as we start working with different frameworks, we understand the pros and cons of those. And that is why we gradually learn that when we start doing some transformation, which are the elements which will serve my need the best, and accordingly we pick and choose. And unfortunately, many a times we see this problem that customers come and they impose a framework on us. They will say, I want to use XYZ framework, let us do it. Problem is, when something is imposed without even understanding whether that is really needed or not, it doesn't really make much sense. We will blindly try to implement that framework for a few days, a week, or months, and then we will realize that it is not working. And then someone will take a blame that this vendor was not a good one, so we are going to chuck off this vendor, and vendor A goes out, vendor B comes in. And when everything goes out, so everything fails, then probably some consultants will be brought into the picture that now you come and save us. So, what I'm trying to say is, whenever we are asked that let us go and implement framework X or Y or Z, we should first understand that what is the underlying situation and do we really need this framework? How is this framework going to address my problems? Why should I be using this? So we should try and understand the why, and then we should be gradually moving forward. Now, we said that we are going to do some selection. And what should be our approach when we are supposed to be selecting our framework? So we heard that, there are frameworks like, yes, we are all familiar with Scrum. And then with time, in 83, Dr. Sutherland came up with Scrum at Scale. Nexus was also during the same time. There are a lot of other frameworks, and 2011, of course, SAFe came into the picture. In between, Less was there. Now, there are a lot of other frameworks as well, which are much more simpler and much more easier to do. But in spite of going into the debate of which framework is better or which one is not so good, let us try and see that what is the correct way of understanding. So in in order to understand which frameworks works best for me, because you see, there is no one best solution in this scenario. Every scenario may expect some specific given solution. So what framework is working for one particular organization may not work as well for another organization. And that is why you see that probably one fine day, Spotify decided that they are going to do something on their own. And today we are so crazy that we have started calling it as a Spotify framework, and we are all gung-ho about following the same. Whereas Spotify did it because it supported their requirement. It was good for their need. Doesn't necessarily mean that what they did, it is also going to be equally applicable and equally beneficial for my given context. So we have to keep our mind open. So it would help that when we start understanding about framework, and when we are getting into a situation where we're trying to evaluate which one would be the best framework, we have to first understand that what is my current resources. What I mean by that is, and resource means not only, unfortunately, I should have changed this word, but for the lack of a better word, resource, by and large, it is encompassing my human being, the human talent. It also means that what kind of knowledge I have. Based on that, we would have to see that what is the best suited framework for me. And what I mean by that is the maturity level of an organization. Are we really good to jump into a complex framework, or should we be starting at the very base so that the learning becomes easy for all of us? Then we have to think that, okay, so now I have got an understanding about where I stand. My as is clear to me. Where I am targeting to move, what is my future need? So now I understand what is my to-be state. I have to also take into consideration the transformation that we are trying to do using a framework. Is it a green field or is it a brown field? Am I trying to do a transformation which is half done and probably in a some kind of a stuck stage? It has taken a pause. No one knows why. It is not going anywhere. Am I starting from there, or am I starting afresh? Because if you're starting halfway, you have to carry a lot of baggage. You have to really do a lot of unlearning before you can start your learning journey and then the transformation. So we have to take into account that aspect as well. What is a common language? What would make sense for this entire community of transformation journey to understand? What I mean by that language is not definitely, I'm not meaning the international speaking language or the programming language. What I am referring by this is, when we are talking in terms of maturity, here comes the concept about the leadership mindset. Is it a situation where leadership is trying to enforce an agility just because while playing golf, some CTO told the another CTO, guys, I am doing agile. Are you guys also doing agile? We are doing, 20% more revenue year on year by doing agile. So the other CTO or the CEO gets very excited, and he or she goes to this organization and sends out a circular from today we want to do agile. Is it that kind of a language that is prevailing, or is it because the organization really understands that they are in a need to transform, and that is why they are trying to become much more agile, which means they are trying to be faster? Then we have to figure out of the different frameworks which are available, what we as the consultants or the agile coaches or the advisors think is the most user-friendly format for the transformation organization to adapt. If it is a mature organization, they are very much into a lot of complexities. They understand the concepts about, a rational unified process. They are pretty, they are working in a multiple operating system kind of a structure where they have an ITSM flow. A lot of work is happening to keep their lights on, but in a steady pace. There, probably we can get a feeling that they would accept a framework like SAFe to be much more dominant for them, much more accommodating for them, because they are much more familiar in that kind of a structure with kind of hierarchies in place, a lot of roles that would help them to fit into the picture. But if we feel that this organization is a kind of a startup, they are in a pretty fast pace, and it's a, kind of things are pretty disruptive. If that is the case, to implement a structure like SAVE, they will pretty much, take it, they will learn it for a day or two, and they will get tired of it and they will move out. So for them, we would have to think about something much more simpler. And of course, we have to also see that, is it really cost effective? Because you see, whenever we are thinking in terms of implementing a transformation journey or driving a transformation journey, the training and the learning and the eventual handholding, the leadership learning and bringing them on board, everything has a cost involved, cost and time. So is it really cost effective for the organization? And cost in the sense, not just money, but also in terms of the time involvement, because we should not be, or the customer even should not be expecting that the transformation is going to happen overnight. It will take several months, few years, and that is when they are going to get the actual success out of it. So to summarize this slide, the most effective scaling framework is which would try and address most of my requirements. And in order to do a good job, we first have to understand what is where I am standing today and where I am heading. So those has to be very clear. Because end of the day, this is a fact that we really don't have one size fits all kind of a solution. Whosoever comes forward and says that, my framework is a one size fits all, even with multiple versions for the matter, it cannot address to all the different permutation combination that we see in the organizations today. So now to give some examples, if we think that, we are trying to do a lot of scaling here and there, and people are talking about doing a lot of transformation, and people are actually using, or if I am trying to be a little bit harsh, probably a lot of people are trying to hide behind the framework to safeguard some of the possible failures. Let us try and see what are the return on investment we are getting. You see, scaled agile, I mean, I am not naming any framework. I'm just saying that all the frameworks within the scaling format, if we are using that, by and large, we see that they have given a lot of good returns. So yes, transparency has increased, the throughput has increased, so the turnaround time has reduced, predictability has improved, and with the transparency, improvement of transparency, we will see that product quality would automatically improve. And if the product quality improves, then you will need lesser number of patches. And if you need lesser number of patches, means you would see lesser number of defects. Lesser number of defects means your revenue drainage would be less, and you would be able to do a lot more work with lesser effort. So it is more, by and large, a positive outflow. So you're going to see a lot of good returns. So it makes sense that we should be using a lot of scaling frameworks, maybe in combination, but it makes sense. But just for a food for thought, let us also think, what have we done so far by using Scrum? Many organizations, they have been using Scrum. Probably they have used Scrum in some variation, but they have used it. And if we look into the kind of return we have got from Scrum, and you would see they are not far behind. So there also we see that reduced time to market by around, at least 20% on an average. Code quality has been improved, and if code quality improves, means my defects are reduced. My defects are reduced means my technical debt has come down. My technical debt has come down means my product output is better. My customers are happier. My success and stock prices are hopefully going high. So Scrum is not far behind. So if that is the case, what is the driving factor for me to jump into the scaling framework bandwagon? So that is a separate discussion altogether. My discussion here is not about why or why not we should be using framework. We tried establishing the fact that yes, frameworks are good, it saves time. There are predefined approaches, predefined good practices, but I am also trying to establish this fact that in certain cases, simple solutions do much better than bringing in a complex framework. Now, selection of a framework for all these reasons is a balancing act. We have to understand the current situation. What is my platform, where I am standing? Then I have to pick and choose some of the best possible fits, some of the libraries. I have to pull them together to come out with a possible best solution in that particular given context. With this in mind, that this particular solution may not work in the next project or the next transformation journey that I'm going to take forward. So with that caveat, we have to take it forward. And then hopefully in the coming days, we will see things are giving us much and more better result. And hopefully as things progresses, we will see same practices which has been successful for you. Someone will take it and they will launch a new version of their framework with version 7 and version 8. And there will be people going crazy about their certification as well. But you can take pride that those are the good practices that I have been using for years, and they are now being used by so many other people as well. So end of the day, it is of course a balancing act. Now towards the end of the session, and like frameworks are never ending, there is, I mean, when I started learning about Scrum, I was not even aware that there is something separate which is needed for scaling, because I was working at one point of time with PricewaterhouseCoopers, where we were doing a lot of scaling for our customers. And we really scaled simply by using Scrum, even for the matter in Cognizant. And Ashutosh may be aware of that. We were actually doing a project for one of the medical benefit management organization, where we scaled it up to around 78 Scrum teams. It was at that point of time one of the largest Scrum implementation within Cognizant. And if you are familiar with this particular framework, I don't know how many of you are familiar. Anyone have been through this framework before? Raise of hands. Yes, no? Do you know who is the author of this framework?
It is you.
No, I wish. There is a virtual chocolate as a gift, whosoever can name the author of this framework. Or otherwise, I will leave it up to you. It's a very renowned person who has created this, and he created it quite some time back. So you see, this is the planning, how the planning goes. And, unfortunately, then it kind of, collapses. So it's the cuckoo train that he is to call. So I will leave it up to you to figure it out who did that. Now we come to the closing. And in the closing, I will give you the scenario that, when we get, and that is probably what someone had said earlier, that if we use frameworks, we take it as is, keeping our mind shut, just trying to blindfoldedly follow whatever the framework tells me. In that case, the ending is generally not so good. So we have to keep our minds open, because, I use this word a lot, that, mind and parachute, they work best when they're open. So if you don't keep your minds open, we are going to end up in a pretty nasty state, which we should ideally try to avoid. So keep in mind that frameworks are just helpers. Just the way when we are writing codes, there are helper classes. So frameworks are helpers. But end of the day, it is our human intelligence and instinct which are going to define how success can be achieved. So let us not try and blindly follow frameworks just because one framework is very popular or one framework is very easy to use. Let us understand the pros and cons and then accordingly choose the libraries, not necessarily the framework on its entirety. So saying that, we come to the questions part of it. And what I thought is, before anyone asks any question, I will probably start by asking a question. So you remember that, today's topic, we said that the discussion is going to be WOF, War of Frameworks. So do you know what is the meaning of WOF? You never know, there could be a virtual prize for this.
Yeah, I hope people, you are able to unmute yourself. Just checking it here.
Yeah, we can unmute, but we don't know the answer.
Okay.
Okay.
So you see, this is basically in Australian jargon, it means a foolish person. And the reason why I called it WOF is because it is doesn't really make sense if we keep on fighting about, this framework is good or that framework is good or this is bad, this is worse. Everything has its own purpose. Every framework has its fitting place. Every framework has its own use. So whenever we are trying to use frameworks, it does not make any sense at all to fight and get into an argument that, this is good, that is bad. Because I see a lot of, name shaming about some frameworks. I mean, that really does not make any sense. Every framework has so many different things to learn. And we should be taking the learning from the frameworks. But when we try and implement those learning, we have to understand that which part of the learning we have to use. So for example, whatever we have learned from class 1 to our graduation, not necessarily in the last few years, what we have learned, we have want to use it as a whole. But we take the learning through the entire journey of our learning. So my request, and this is the takeaway from my end, is that whenever we are using frameworks, it is absolutely good to use frameworks. But two takeaways. One, frameworks does not necessarily need to be complex to address a complex problem. It can be a very simple framework which can address a very complex problem. And second is, whenever we are using frameworks, let us try and use the libraries more than the framework as is. Because end of the day, it is human intelligence and intellect and instinct which is going to define this success. So saying that, I will probably stop. Enough talking. I'll probably give you back 15 minutes of your time so that you can enjoy the weekend, unless, of course, you have any questions. And if you have any questions, not necessarily I'm going to answer it, because you see this screen says it is about question. You are free to ask your questions. If I can answer, I will try definitely answering it. Otherwise, I will probably pass it on to the host.
Okay. So very interesting talk, Arijit, I must say. I mean, I never imagined that I can apply the concept of library so succinctly to the framework world. I think definitely for me, it has been a good learning, what I can say. And I'm sure our participants have also got some good learning. Yeah, so we have a forum open for questions. Yeah, I mean, Arijit has already put me in a spot that a question he is not able to answer, it will come to me. But nevertheless, that should not stop us from curiosity. Please unmute yourself and ask questions in case you have any questions. Anyone, any questions on the topic or what was covered? Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. I recently came across one of a coach who was asking me for an idea. The organization's leaders were emphasizing on moving to a particular framework on scaling, but the coach doesn't feel that it will fit them, right? In that case, how do you approach this problem statement? How do you get the leadership buy-in on your thought processes? Is there any recommendation or example that you can share?
So thanks, Aruna. That is a good question. So you see, I will quote Dr. Sutherland on this. And Dr. Sutherland always says this, that you cannot run a Macintosh program on a Windows operating system. So if your leadership buy-in is not there to drive something, it is not really futile to do something different otherwise. So what I'm trying to say is, if your leadership is determined that they are trying to implement a framework and that is what they are conveying or they are asking you to do, or assume that they are asking me to do, I have to understand where I am located. What is my role there? If I am an advisor, I will definitely ask a question that, okay, so you are suggesting me to make this, you are suggesting me to use this framework. Let me also understand that why you decided for this particular framework. Why not something else? Have we given it a due diligence? Have we really given the other frameworks a thought? Or if I am in the role of an implementer, where probably I am one of the vendor who is supposed to be implementing the framework, then I am not exactly in a position to question that thought. I have to go ahead and implement. But, and this is an important but, that as an agile advisor, as a preacher, we also have to give the caveat that, this framework we can use for sure, but you know what? These are the possible challenges that I foresee. Are we okay with this kind of challenges? Because tomorrow when we land up in this kind of problem, you should not come back and tell me that, Aruna, why didn't you warn me about this possible problems beforehand? So to be on the safer side, we should definitely convey what is our thinking about it, but understanding from where I am coming, whether I am in, I am wearing the shoes of an implementer or I am in the shoes of the advisor. So that is very critical.
Thank you. that actually gave a lot of solution. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Yes, anyone else? Any questions? And yeah,
So-
feel free to come on camera. Yeah, go ahead, Anand. I think you had a question. Sorry.
Yeah. So the question, it's not a question rather. I mean, I liked your analogy when you actually tried to compare the frameworks with the programming languages and the libraries and other things, right? So that was very resonating basically. So I liked that. So thanks a lot for that. Now
Thank
coming
you.
to the question part of it, you said that we need to actually see whether we are in the role of advisor or we are just an implementer, right? Now, a lot of responsibility comes when there is a advisor kind of role, and you very nicely elaborated in a subtle way of warning the leadership about the downfalls or
Pitfalls.
the pitfalls, right? About it. How do you actually go ahead and do the decision making part along with the leadership? Of course, without leadership buy-in, it cannot go ahead, right?
Correct.
So if there is a conflict here, right, even if you tell them about the pitfalls, right, if there is no consensus coming up, right, how do you tackle that situation?
So you see, I mean, very pertinent question, and this is one of the problems that we face in today's world, where whenever we are trying to do any transformation, we are often struggling to get the buy-in. Now, the simplest way, and this is where I take the learning from, the software, the traditional way of working, and whenever we are thinking or putting the hat of a project manager, not a scrum master, project manager, I always think in terms of who is my sponsor, who is funding it. So the moment I understand that this is the person who is holding the money, I mean, there is a saying that, if you run after the money, you will find your target person. So here also, if we figure out from whose hand this money is coming out, I will go and try to convince them that, sir, madam, this is where we are today. This is what I'm told to do. Do you really want to end up in a situation where today you are giving me 1 million, tomorrow you will be asked to spend 5 million? Do you really want to get into a situation like that? Rather, you give me 2 million today and I save you 3 million in the next year. So if we can figure that out, your job is half done.
Yeah. But for that, first of all, you need to build a very good rapport with them.
Absolutely.
So that they understand what you say and they trust you, right?
Correct. And that is why we have to go through the gatekeepers. I mean, in organization, there are so many gatekeepers. So what happens is, as a consultant, if we keep on approaching the gatekeepers, it's a kind of, loss of time and effort. I am trying to preach them, but no point in preaching them. They are not the decision makers. So we have to reach out to the decision maker and then we have to convince.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, that answers. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Most welcome.
Any other question anyone has?
Yeah, this is Suresh.
Yeah, Suresh, go ahead. Yeah.
We see a lot of frameworks. We used to hear Nexus, Spotify, DAD, and all that. But there is a lot of buzz around Scaled Agile framework, and many organizations use Scaled Agile. In fact, I don't know what was lagging in the other frameworks. If anyone got a chance to work on the other frameworks, what really is the edge for the Scaled Agile framework? Just wanted to know.
Okay. So first and foremost, the disclaimer that, today we are not going to be fighting about frameworks, and that is why you use the word WOF. But, I mean, without even going into the fact that why people are using a SAFe or what is so different about it, I will just go by the numbers. I mean, you see, 2011, this framework came in. Till date, it has been through at least 5 major versions. And the kind of popularity it has gained, it is phenomenal. I mean, there must be something, right? I mean, I am not promoting SAFe, but there has to be something which people are, or rather I would say corporates, they are they're finding an alignment with the framework. So whether it is a good framework or bad framework, that is a different story altogether. We are not going to go there, but we have to give credit, and we have to give credit to Dean Leffingwell for creating it, for visualizing it the way he has visualized. And quite honestly, the first time when I saw, way back in 2012, when I first saw the big picture, I was really surprised that, how he depicted the entire diagram with multiple layers and the concept about trains. I mean, those days, the picture were different compared to what we have, but, where subtle things, they matter a lot. You see, an architect with a ponytail, those are very small, intricate matters, and those thinkings are very, very, sophisticated. And I give him a lot of respect and, credit for that. I mean, not everyone can do it. Now, but I am not again going into the fact that whether it's a good framework or a bad framework. I have in my life, I have used SAFe, I have used less. I had since my early days, I have been using Scrum. I do use a lot of Scrum at scale, which is anyway, it's a kind of, I would say, bloated version of Scrum. But it has a lot of good practices as well. Similarly, SAFe has a lot of good practice. In fact, the first thing that caught my attention when I was introduced to SAFe and when I went through the training in Bangalore in 2013, the catchword for me was build on cadence, release on demand. You see, that is such an easy phrase, but it catches the attention because that is a need of the hour. And those were, few elements which have evolved with time. So you see, it has to have some good elements. And that is why I'm saying that let us not get into that fight of which framework is good or bad. Let us take the good part from all the different frameworks.
Yeah, true.
I think it is the most adaptive framework, right? I mean, I have seen it from 4.6 onward.
Yes, true. So SAFe is working well, especially for the bigger projects and at enterprise level. Even I'm working on a SAFe framework for the last few years. But only the thing I see is version by version they are releasing, but they are keep on accumulating too many things. It is becoming bulky. The core competencies and all these things from here and there they are pulling and putting it. So I think they can shed some of the things because anyway, those core things everybody knows, but people are afraid. Even when I give the trainings also, people used to ask, what is this? What is this? Because I give training on one particular area, SAFe Scrum Master or leading SAFe, but people used to ask everything in the framework. They are curious to know about those things. If I talk about all those things, no, the 2 days is not enough. So too many things in the framework.
In 2015, rather, so SAFe had a version called LSE, the Lean System Engineering. So you see, I mean, you never know that in the coming days, there won't be something simpler because the way SAFe framework has been categorized, there are opportunity for government, for, big picture, the entire SAFe. So similarly, there may be a simpler version for very small scale or similar implementation. We never know.
Right.
But point is that, it doesn't make sense because tomorrow there may be some other framework coming into the picture. But point is, we will have to learn from the frameworks, and a framework cannot gain so much popularity without having some good things in it. So it has to be a lot of good things there, and that is why people are appreciating and using it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. I had a clarification.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked extensively on several scaling frameworks and interacted with some of the people who've created the frameworks firsthand, from the creators of the framework. For example, Basford created LESS, and I worked extensively with him.
In Singapore, I guess.
Yeah, and Europe.
Okay.
So the key question here is, what would be the, I mean, and you mentioned your workings with LESS. So what has been the experiences that you have understood from LESS perspective? Because one key facet of LESS has been that they have not gone into too much of SAFe. I mean, I myself into several SAFe implementations, and I know it has its strengths. But on the other hand, LESS And again, I know we're not championing any frameworks, but you need to experiment. That's the main idea around less. So how would you say has been your interactions on the less part of things in terms of adapting it?
So I have interacted with Bas and Craig Laman as well. And in fact, one of my friend, a close friend, is a less trainer himself in UK. So I have a soft spot for less. But then again, I have a soft spot for Scrum as well. And I really like Scrum at Scale as well. And I appreciate Dean Leffingwell as well. So you see that, my mind is pretty open. And what I have found in my experiences, the last 25 years I have been in this industry, there is an opportunity where you can actually play around with different frameworks. Less, it has a simplicity. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, not many people understand, or because of the simplicity, one example I often give to my friends and colleagues, that assume that, I'm just diverting a bit, assume that, you are planning to buy a smartphone. And if this smartphone comes from a Nokia or a Samsung of the world versus an unknown company or not so known company, in spite of having all the good features, probably even better features, probably at a much cheaper price, we will probably think twice, thrice before taking a shot at it. Whereas the moment someone says it's an Apple product, without even thinking twice, I would say that is a much better product. Whereas the other product from a probably not so known company with many features sitting next to me is much more capable to deliver all the functionalities that I am looking for. So my aim here is to say, unfortunately, less has the potential to do very many things which we are trying to solve by using other frameworks. But maybe it is because of the less branding. Like, for example, less does not have too many trainings happening in India. In fact, at one point of time, so I come from Calcutta, and I am based out of Bangalore. So I try to carry out multiple less workshops so that I can gather people and share the information about less. But you see, it needs a proper push from the leadership, the top, and that is where the leadership buy-in comes in. So here for less, I think it is the leadership buy-in which we have to take. And there has to be some, strong push. In fact, I tried to get my colleague to run a few training workshop on less in India, but it never really got the kind of attention it would have otherwise deserved. So I think a lot of branding, promotion, marketing, it kind of impacts our way of thinking. So I am saying that the framework-wise, capability-wise, it's a very, very capable framework, and I would say much simpler framework to use. Probably the area of product owner kind of a concept is not something which I like a lot, but then again, it is how the framework is, and it's fair enough. But to answer your question, it can do wonders for a lot of opportunities where we are unfortunately not using it, and it may be because there is a lack of awareness.
Is it only lack of awareness, or it's also, I think, in a way, because I've seen it in an implementation, and I've been in a less implementation myself. And in that implementation, they were requests to short chain certain aspects of the framework, which as a grounding principle, they decided against doing that. So less builds on the Scrum fundamentals very well without making it overly complex. That's the first part. And second part is that they never, again, I'm not championing it, but in that particular instance, they never went in to implement it and sacrifice their. They said, we need this time to test it out, and I can't give you an answer. And that's the experimentation part of the framework that we really have to live with, and they refuse to compromise that. So that is, again, I have implemented both safe and in this shop, we implemented safe, we implemented less, both. But the point I'm trying to highlight is that despite they finally implemented in a very small scale in that organization, and but they did not go for a compromise. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, so you see, the philosophy wise, what Les brings on the table, that is very good, very strong. And Les, what I like about Les is all the Les followers, they are very proud, and I would say they take pride in the fact that Les is how it is. If you want to use it, go ahead and use it. If you don't want to use it, we am least bothered.
Yeah,
So
I
that
mean,
is so
they
I
were
think that
happy
is
to
good.
implement it only in that user segment or
Mhm.
that particular division, and they did not want to go after the mass market, even in that same organization.
Yeah, so I think it is one simple example is that, at one point of time in Calcutta, we were organizing an Agile event, because in the eastern part of India, we never really had too many Agile events prior to that. So we called it Agile of East, and Ashutosh was one of the speaker over there. And what we did is we actually approached Les, and in fact, I spoke to Vad and Craig and Bas, and I asked them that, we are organizing this and we would like to promote less. It is not very well known. Would you like to be a part of this event? And they said, no, we are not into this kind of events. We don't promote or we don't sponsor. These are not the kind of forte that we follow. So they were out of it. We approached, scrum.org. They supported us. Scrum.org, for that reason, you will see, is doing relatively better than less. Incidentally, we did not reach out to SAFE, but I am sure that, probably if we had reached out, SAFE has a much bigger kitty and they would have shown interest. But you see, end of the day, to set a brand, at the frameworks end of the day, are a lot of branding. Because you see, if I tell you that there is a framework called RACE, you will laugh at me that, RAGE. You will say that, no one has heard about this RAGE framework. What is this all about? But there is a, framework which is meant for the government agency implementation. No one knows about it. Who cares? So to set, establish a framework and then to make it popular, there is a lot of effort that goes in. So if someone is doing it, and if we have the money, probably you and I can also launch a framework and we can make it very popular. But otherwise, we have to live with what we have. So that is the unfortunate truth. I am very conscious that we are over time. I will request all of you that in the chat, you will see that Ashutosh has shared the link for his YouTube channel. It's a wonderful channel, a lot of learning. And what I have noticed is Ashutosh has also started releasing a short videos. I think the yesterday's video was talking about the technical depth. And he gave a nice analogy about, taking a flight and how it goes to a certain altitude and it stays there. So whenever you get a chance, not only subscribe, but I will do request you to, spread this awareness to your respective organization so that others can also come and learn from that. These are all pure learning, and these are so nice way of putting it. Kudos to Ashutosh, and we should all support him in the best possible way. So saying that, I will probably pause. I know it is over time, 7 minutes on top. So a very happy weekend to all of you. And thanks for all of your time. And Ashutosh, back to you, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Arijit. Yeah, and really appreciate you promoting my channel, and really appreciate you. So, yeah, I mean, in the interest of time, we'll have to close this. But yeah, I'm sure this conversation was really great. So yeah, this is also the QR code of the channel. If anyone is interested, do subscribe, and yeah, I mean, also give some very candid feedback. Not that you have to agree to what I'm saying. I mean, you can always have a counter view or a different view. We'll be more than happy to hear about you. Yeah. So we have more such sessions coming up in the weeks ahead. Do connect with us, do subscribe, and you'll come to know about these channels. And obviously, I would like to appreciate the hard work which Arijit has put into this. So just a small token of appreciation and gratitude to you, Arijit. Thanks once again for sharing this. And yeah, looking forward for conferences in the eastern part of the country, right? I was very excited that time to come. It was before pandemic. I know I had visited Kolkata that time. So
yes. And whenever we do an event,
looking forward to visit again and
yes.
do something for the region also and share my views.
Yes,
Yeah.
we will definitely look
Just
forward
as
to
an
have
information to everyone else, yeah, thanks a lot. And just wanted to quickly something on a side note. I'll be in Delhi NCR on 25th and 26th. There's an Agility Today conference happening. So in case anyone is attending that conference, do visit me in person. It's in Gurugram. So 25th is Saturday, 26th is Sunday. So I'll be there for 2 days. We'll be happy to meet many folks there, especially from the region. And yeah, I think we are almost at the end of the time. So once again, thanking Arijit, thanking participants, especially for the wonderful questions being asked. And I'm sure this was an exciting investment for you to start your weekend. And yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, and keep patronizing these sessions. I'm sure we have more interesting speakers, more interesting topics coming up ahead. So do connect with us and make this event a successful one. So thank you very much, and bye for now. Have a happy weekend.